So yeah, let's do steps. Is that good? Let's talk.
Yeah, let's talk about steps.
All right, steps. Martha Morgan joins us to talk about steps, how important they are, and how to do them right.
Well, the first thing is that what is and is not a step, and a step tells the reader to do something. If it doesn't tell the reader to do something, it's not a step. And that's one of the things I often see is where people are telling me the next thing that happens. But instead, you want the step to be the next thing to do. So, in that context, let's talk about all the different parts of a step and how it all feeds back to the business of telling the reader what to do.
Okay, that's fantastic too, about telling the reader what to do, not what's going to happen. That's a very subtle but very important. So I'm all ears.
Right. And the reason that there are different parts of a step is because our goal, of course, is to get the reader to do the action successfully. So there's what they need to do, and then supporting information to help make sure they're able to do it successfully. So the first part, and people who work in DITA will be familiar with this, the first part is the command. It's usually a sentence in imperative voice, but it is what we want them to do. And it sometimes, the goal of the action, you're doing something, but it's not really that clear about like, why am I doing this exactly? And for that, you want to state the goal before describing how to achieve it. So to accomplish X, do Y. And that's so that the reader feels in control of like, I'm doing this and I know why. I'm not just blindly doing, what I'm told. I know what I am trying to do here.
To interrupt you is that, so you're setting the context. This is what you're going to achieve. And then you're saying, and then the imperative is do this to achieve.
To accomplish this, do what? And that's just as is if you need to be a little clearer about why why they're doing this step. Sometimes it's obvious, but sometimes it's not. And so, it's perfectly fine to set that context of what the goal of that particular step is, and then tell them, do it. Sometimes we have optional steps where it's or conditional, so it's perfectly fine to say, if X, if this is you, then do that. Or if you want to do this, then do that. Again, you're sort of setting like, what's the objective of this particular step? And one thing I often see people being very liberal with the word must. And the problem with that is like, you must do this and you must do that, is that it starts to lose impact. And so you want the command part of the step to be an imperative voice, but I prefer that writers use must only if it's something that they may not want to do, or it seems like, it's like where you need to get a little tougher in telling them what to do. But for the most part, just tell them what the next thing to do is.
And you can be just backing up, we say imperative, right? What we mean is just a direct statement, right? Can you give a couple of examples of imperative statements? Those are always helpful.
Enter the name of the system. It's just, enter this, click that, select this. It's just very, it's not, people want to be told what to do because they don't know what to do. So you're not being, hostile or bossy. You are helping them by guiding them about what the things to do are to get to the end goal of the procedure. So you're being helpful. You're not being rude, but must, if overused, starts to get a little, if nothing else, diluted. It loses impact. So after that, you've got different kinds of supporting information. And in CX style, whether you're working in DITA or you're working in Markdown, the supporting information is literally below the command part. So you've got, the numbers like step 3, and then you've got the command, and the information that supports it is right under that. It is not part of the command. Part of the reason for that is to help make your task steps more scannable. Often you're going to have situations where people are doing a task, maybe they've done it before, or they don't need a lot of the background information. Having the command be on a line of its own makes it a lot easier for people to just scan what to do. If all the information that's needed for the step is all part of the same paragraph, it's much harder to scan. So you want the supporting information, but literally on the next paragraph below the command part of the step.
Okay. So you've got the command of the step, and the supporting information that may be necessary as part of that step should be right. Okay. But not a part of it, so that I can just scan and see the steps and then know the context. Is that
right? And the supporting information, there's different kinds. You don't have to use all of the kinds in every step. It's just, what do you think? Because likely you've tried out the step yourself. What do you think someone might need to perform the action successfully? So, for example, for some things, we're asking the reader to indicate a choice. They need to select what they want of a variety of choices. For CX style, you can show that in a 2-column table. If you want this, then choose that. We also have unordered lists that where again it's just a sentence. If you want XYZ, then pick 1, 2, 3. But again, you're framing it in terms of what the reader who's performing the task wants to accomplish. So you associate different choices with different goals for that one step. And that's a very useful thing, because decisions are hard to make. You're giving them the information they need to feel confident in the choice they make in that step. Another piece that you might have is indicating what the result of performing that step is. And that you don't always need that, but sometimes it's very reassuring. You perform, we've all been there, where you perform a step and there's a reaction from the product. And especially if you might feel a little uneasy about whether you performed the step correctly, having the result of a successful step is very reassuring. It's like, oh, it turned green. I guess I did it correctly. Great. Let's move on to the next step. So including the step result is useful, especially when you need to provide some kind of reassurance for the reader, or if they need to be able to confirm that the step was successful before they move on.
I can't tell you the number of times that I've taken a step, being very nervous about it and not been sure of that.
Too.
It goes back to what you said, though, is that we've got to put ourselves in the shoes of the users, because if you don't know, it makes you very hesitant to proceed.
It does. And this is one of the situations where it can be very useful to provide, maybe a text description, but also maybe a graphic. Customers tell us how much they really like it when there are screenshots and other graphics that, it's one, a lot of people are visual learners, but also just to show them what doing the step correctly looks like. And it doesn't have to be the full screen. It could just be, a little corner of the screen, if that's the part that's relevant, but just showing them what doing it correctly looks like, gives people confidence that they did it correctly and they're in a good place to move on. Because I don't know about you, but I've been in too many situations where I find out that I did something incorrectly like 5 steps ago.
Yeah.
And having that confirmation is very encouraging, and sort of, if nothing else, I think it helps keep users stressed down a bit. So give some thought to when it's a good idea to talk about what the result is, especially if it's visual. And sometimes it's useful to include an example. So we have extensive examples of performing perhaps an entire task, but sometimes it's useful to include an example of performing just the one step. It might be a code block or a graphic, but just, telling people is like, given, set what the intended result or goal of the example is, so they know what to look for, and they can kind of get a set like, okay, this is what it looks like in the example, and it helps people sort of knit together what they need to do in this step. Particularly for developer documentation, I often see where people are putting example code or CLI commands, example commands in running text. That makes it harder to see. It works much better if they put it in a code block, whether that's for data or for Markdown. It's easier for people to see the example. It's also, if they want to copy and paste the example into their own terminal window, it's easier if it's separate, if it's in its own little box. And the last thing is sometimes we've got a step that requires some sub-steps. And that's where I think some writers run into trouble, because they've got a task that actually requires like literally dozens of steps from start to finish. And when it comes to sub-steps, you kind of have to gauge at what point is it not a step with sub-steps, but when is it really another task? It needs to be a task on its own. And so we try to discourage overuse of sub-steps. For example, if you're working in one of our data tools, a sub-step cannot itself have sub-steps. You can go one layer down, but that's it. And my sort of usual feel, if I see a step with more than 3 sub-steps, I'll often query the writer and ask, are you sure that what you're documenting isn't a task all by itself? And it kind of depends on level of complexity and how long it's going. But if I'm seeing a very long task with many sub-steps, I think we want to take a step back and consider maybe this is a series of tasks.
I remember editing a task with 47 steps.
Oh, God. Yes, exactly.
It didn't. I put my editor hat on. It didn't tell me what I was doing exactly, and I'm going through it, and I had no idea if when I get to step 46, does the whole thing blow up, and I go back to step 1? Do I go back to I had no idea. So your point about considering what is that chunk to be that's fantastic observation.
And the nice thing is that if you do find that after you've crafted your steps, that you do have a very large number of steps, I would say more than 10, you want to look very hard and see maybe what you have is multiple tasks rather than a very long list of steps. You've already done the hard part, which is identifying what the steps need to be. Grouping them into child tasks is comparatively easy. It's getting the steps that are clear and have all the information that a reader needs to perform them well. That's the toughest part.
Yeah.
So, if you find that it just takes more steps than really should fit in a single task, you've already done the hard part.
This is really incredible information. And I want to just check, this sort of matters whatever you're working in, right? Whether it's data or Markdown or in a GDoc, right? We want things to be consistent, the way we handle tasks or procedures.
Exactly. I mean, not least because the people reading this content, they don't know what tools we used. It's they wouldn't care if they did know, but they don't know. It's just all Salesforce content to them. So we want some consistency in how we structure the information. Also, some of the early findings with the AI tools is they want the content to be predictable in structure. It helps them kind of identify like what certain kinds of information is. And so consistency in how we craft a task helps make that content play a little better with the agents as well.
Oh boy. So I'm writing, I need to be consistent for that reason as well, right? Because we have to make our content consumable by the agents, the AI agents who are going to eventually be, who are now presenting the information to our users, right?
It is, and it's a good example of something that, all right, that's helpful for agents, but it's also very useful, for humans as well. So it's they're not they're not conflicting goals here, but it does mean that if you're working in one of our more flexible tool chains like Docusaurus or SF Docs, you still want to consider how you are crafting an individual step so that it is consistent with our style, which is pretty much based on DITA, even if you're not working in DITA yourself.
Yeah, and there are reasons for that, which you've eloquently identified. So this is amazing, and I think you've also got some you've got a couple of extra resources that we can post with this quick bite, because I think this is super valuable for anybody that's writing, including me. So it's much appreciated.
Oh, well, thank you. Yes, I have a slide set to share out that has
Awesome.
this, for everyone's reference.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Stan.